Stars, I'm a fool for your love.
Hello and welcome back to Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and welcome back to this piloting series, The Road to Flying. Now in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to properly configure any joystick or controller so you can get the most out of your flying experience. Whether you're new to Microsoft Flight Simulator or an experienced pilot, this video will provide you with the information you need to set up your controls and peripherals for the best possible experience. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Alright, so the first thing you need to do is just set up a flight, and you can just use the Cessna 152. Okay, so looking around the cockpit here, you can see that there are many different switches and controls that you're going to need to operate whilst on a flight. Now you can just use the mouse and click them, but that's not very realistic and it detracts from the immersion of the flight sim. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up some buttons and key bindings on our controller so we can use those to interact with the buttons and everything in the cockpit. So to do this, just hit escape on your keyboard and then select the control options menu. It will then bring up a screen that looks like this, and at the top there will be different tabs with different controllers that you have plugged in, and then if you click on one on the right hand side, it will show you a little picture of the controller that you selected if it is a recognizable compatible device. So if we click on the expand collapse all tab, this will just expand all of the subsections of controls that you can select, and you can see here there are quite a lot of options that you can choose from, which is why it's a good idea to be able to bind them to different buttons on your controller. So to make it easier to find a specific control option, there is a search box at the top where you can search the name of any available button mapping. So for example here we'll search up parking brake, a very useful one to have, and as you can see it brings up two options, one of which I have already assigned. So one of these is toggle parking brakes and one of these is set the parking brakes. Now I'm going to want to select the toggle parking brakes, as it means I can just use one button to turn the parking brake on and off. So I'm going to want to clear the button mapping that is already configured, and then I'm going to want to bind the same button to the other parking brake mapping. So to assign a button, all you need to do is click on the box of the one that you want to assign, and it'll bring up this little tab. Now there are two ways in which you can assign a button. You can either use this drop down menu to select the button that you want to use, which is a little bit more difficult because you have to know the name of the button that you want to select, or you can just use the scanning feature where you just click on the box and then you click the button on your controller and it will automatically recognize it and select it for you. And then once you've done that, just go to the bottom and click validate and it will save your changes. Also, if it's the first time you're setting up a custom button mapping profile, it will ask you to create a new input profile and just give it a name of something that you'll remember. So if you want to have different profiles for different aircraft, then it's easy to find which is which. So as you can see, we now have two assigned buttons to toggle the parking brakes. So we're going to get rid of one of these now. And we do this in the same way as we did before. Just click on the box and then just click clear current input and then validate to save your changes once again. Alright, so again, if you want to find a specific button mapping, then instead of using the search bar, you can use the scan feature. So you can use this to find a button assignment just by clicking on the box and then clicking a button on your controller, and it will automatically find that button mapping for you. Anyway, as you can see, I've used this button for the flaps, but it has been used to increase and decrease the flaps just for this one button, so I'm going to quickly clear one of them. Then before you exit, make sure you click apply and save at the bottom and then just click escape again and it'll take you back to your flight. And now I can show you the changes and how it'll work once you've chosen all your assignments. So you can see the flaps here. I'm just clicking the button on my controller and it's moving them up and down, and you can pretty much select any button in the cockpit and you can assign it to a button on your controller. So it's a pretty cool feature. Now you can also configure an axis just like you would with the button mappings. Now what I mean by this is, for example, the throttle axis or the yoke or the rudder axis, or even like, for example, the mixture or speed brake axis. And so to do this again, just go hit escape on your keyboard, go into the control options and do the same as you did before. And you can see now that I have configured the throttle and mixture axes to the axes on my controller. Okay, so now that we've done all of this, we're going to finally take a look at the sensitivity options. So this is very important. So if you just have a look at the yoke here, you can see that when I move my controller, it moves a little bit, and then suddenly right at the end, it moves a lot. Now this means that it's not linear. So we're going to want to make this as smooth and as linear as possible, as this will make it easier to fly because the controls will be less sensitive. So to do this, we just need to go back into the control options, and then in the top left corner go to the sensitivity options. So once in sensitivity options, you can see some panels that look like this with a bunch of different sliders, and as you can see, when we move our joystick, it moves these little sliders around. So we have one for each axis, so roll, yaw and pitch, as well as the throttle axis on the far right hand side. So starting off on the left and starting with the first slider, we have the sensitivity. So moving this, you can see it changes the little input registry graph. So increasing this, the controls will be more sensitive at the start of the curve and less sensitive at the end. And decreasing it will mean that it will be less sensitive at the start and more sensitive at the end of the curve. And you can see this in the little graph. So for us, as we're flying a general aviation aircraft, we want this at 0% sensitivity, so it's completely linear. And as you can see, when I move my joystick, it now moves in a straight line, so the whole axis is at the same sensitivity. Then dead zone, what it does is if you move your joystick, then no input will be registered at the points of the dead zone, and the larger this is, the larger movement you can put into your joystick without anything being registered as an input. So if your controller has a slight jitter, then you can put this on so it doesn't move the controls in the aircraft. Then neutral, this just adjusts the center point of the controller. So if your controller is not fully calibrated and the center is not completely perfectly in the center of what's being registered as an input, then you can adjust this to where the center point actually is. Then extreme dead zones adds dead zones at the ends of the axes, so no input will be registered at the maximum points of your joystick. And then finally, the reactivity will adjust how quickly the axis is registered, so the less reactive this is, the slower the aircraft will react. So back in the cockpit now, if I move the yoke, you can see that it is a lot smoother now, which means it's going to be a lot easier to fly and it's not going to be as jerky. So there you have it guys, there is a controls and peripherals tutorial, so I really do hope this has helped you if you were struggling to configure your controls, and hopefully means you can have a much more enjoyable experience. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content, and also don't miss the next episode in this series, in which I'll be showing you how to properly use the different cameras in the sim. So once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.